So here's why I think he's a terrible character.
Oh my god. Hello everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast with my boy Daniel.
Hi.
Daniel, what are we doing today?
So this is our new series, Have You Seen, in which we talk about a movie that one of us has seen just recently for the first time and the other person knows fairly well. Last week we did Star Wars The Phantom Menace, so we're working our way through the Star Wars prequels. This week we're up to episode 2, Attack of the Clones. So what's your general impression of the movie, and can you just summarize the plot?
Obi and Anakin are looking after they're looking for the assassin that tried to kill they call her queen, right? But she's a senator as well. So
she was a queen in the first movie and now she's a senator.
Okay, so the senator, someone tried to assassinate her. It's like a plot to kind of like a threat against the galaxy, and then there's a guy called, well, it's not a guy, but he's like they call themselves a Sith. So it's the master. Yeah, he's pretty much, now the Jedi have to pretty much protect everyone, everything, the galaxy from the master. Pretty much. That's what I got from this episode. I'd say the second half of the film was memorable for me, from the point where Anakin lost his mom. From then, that's when it got interesting. Before that, it was all right. I definitely liked the chase scene between with Anakin and Obi when they were chasing the assassin. But I definitely say from the point where Anakin lost his mom, that's when I was like emotionally gripped throughout. And I'll be honest with you, I think I'm slowly falling into the well, this is gonna be a wild statement. I don't think so, but I felt like I was slowly becoming those people that only like Star Wars because of the lightsabers.
Right.
Because honestly, from that point on, when it got to the big war between obviously the Jedis and the robots, are they called clones?
The clones are the ones fighting on the side of the Republic by the end.
Yeah, cool. But what did it refer to the robots?
That's the droid army.
The droid army. Okay, cool. But when it was the Jedis against the droid army, I was like, that's when I could, like, my interest was fully in it. Before, like I said, before the second half of the film, I was like, yeah, it's cool, and then like. Aesthetically, it looked amazing, of course, now we're in 2002, so technology is better. But yeah, I was definitely say from that point on, from when Anakin lost his mum, that's when I was more gripped. But I'll be honest with you, with Anakin's character, I was definitely, the previous movies were making more sense, especially with what Yoda was saying about him, because you could see already the darkness in Anakin, like just throughout the film. Like you could see like his combativeness, his rage, his like he was very skeeving, and like he had some skeeving look, especially when they were trying to get the princess, by the way, which was very disturbing that they ended up hooking up, because I don't know how old the princess was when she met Anakin, but to end up getting married, I was like, this is a WTF moment. Like,
well, more to the point, he was 9.
And how old is she?
Her age is not really the issue. It's that when they met, he was 9.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I want to say there's a 10-year age gap.
Wasn't she a teenager?
Late teens, I would say, maybe.
Okay,
like,
yeah.
Who knows, right? She's been elected queen. I don't, but
Yeah, that made it even disturbing. So.
But there's a good 10-year age difference.
Yeah, that made it even more disturbing. So I was like, okay, so I'm guessing this must be a reflection of the times back in the day. But yeah,
it's kind of an artifact, like it's like we talked about last time, that the decision to make Anakin a child, like a 9-year-old in the first movie, kind of has ripple effects, right? Because now a certain amount of time has to have passed, and there's a limit to how old he can be, and that kind of creates this age gap, right? It's not a part of the story, right? It's never acknowledged, really. The only thing that's acknowledged is that they haven't seen each other in a while, like in several years apparently. But the age gap is not mentioned.
Yeah. But yeah, man, with Anakin, I think his character was definitely the highlight. Of course, it was kind of like centered and revolved around him, as well as protecting the galaxy, but still kind of seeing everything Yoda was saying come into fruition. It's like, ooh, yep, I can see it. Like, I'm starting to see it. He was just very like reactive, very combative, blaming Obi for his mistake, for things that were happening, like trying to say he's a snake and he's kind of holding him back. I'm like, that's just your anger talking, that's your fear talking, and you can see how someone like that can easily slip into the dark side. And that's why I understand why Yoda was so reluctant to teach what's his name, Luke, because obviously Luke had
Yeah.
those similar characteristics when it comes to being, just being combative. Well, not he wasn't as combative in comparison to Anakin, but he was very like he would go against what they would want him to do. So he would do the opposite, pretty much what Anakin would do. So it was like I understand why Yoda was so reluctant, because like, oh nah, not again. I can see the father in him. You know what I'm saying? His father in him. Say Anakin was definitely the highlight for me. But overall it was I feel like I said, I think the second half of the film was probably the most memorable. It was most memorable for me when out like in the whole franchise so far of all the movies I've watched. I'll definitely say it was, yeah, it was the most memorable for me. And you could say maybe because of the lightsabers and the whole action with the lightsabers, maybe it played a role in why I've come to this conclusion. But this is just how I feel based on what I've seen so far. I think I'm just gonna remember that more than anything I've watched so far in Star Wars.
Certainly the most lightsabers we've ever seen on screen at one time at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you liked Anakin? Was he?
When I say liked, I liked me seeing him becoming the threat that Yoda predicted. I didn't like him as a character because, to be fair, the only time I actually liked him as a character was when he defended his mom, because the death of his mom, even though he went OD and overboard by killing children, I was all like, whoa, I get you killing all the. And maybe not even killing all the men. I get you should have killed everyone that was everyone that was a soldier or everyone that was affiliated, even though you wouldn't have known because you just got to the place where they were keeping your mom. Okay, I understand you killing all the men, but killing all the women and the children, like, whoa, that's when you could see, like, okay, this guy definitely got some darkness in him.
Yeah, I've said before that I don't like this movie at all. I think it has massive and fatal flaws, but that scene I think works really well. That really. That's really where this whole point of that we see really for the first time why Jedi are not supposed to have attachments.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Because it can go bad, and we see it in two different ways in this movie, right? The attachment to his mother and the attachment to Padme.
Well, one thing I didn't like about this show, and I think it was mainly happening in the first half, was because it felt like it was jumping into scenes rather than like transitioning smoothly and like transitioning smoothly and moving the story along. It felt like it was just jumping back and forth between different moments in time that do coexist, but at the same time, it just felt like it was jumping. So they didn't really feel like, it just felt like, they didn't really feel like a smooth storytelling. It just felt very, scene, next scene, that scene.
It's got a lot of plot to get through.
It just felt like it was just jumping out at you rather than reading it out to you.
So speaking of Anakin and his relationships, we kind of skipped over Padme last time, and she plays a role in the first movie, but here she plays a much bigger role, and she does more stuff, and she has more agency than she did in the first one. What did you think of her?
She was, I don't know. I think she just played in this one. I didn't really see the significance that she had when it came to, in defense of the galaxy in terms of protecting it. I think she more so protected the galaxy by taming Anakin.
I think it's arguable whether she does that, but I think she's more important in this one in terms of her personal connection to Anakin as opposed to the role she plays as a senator, right?
Well, you could say that she does it. Okay, I think the scene where she's kind of comforting Anakin when he reveals that he killed all the women and children. That's a scene where you're like, it could have gone completely left, as in, because obviously you could see that he was engulfed by his anger. And then when she actually sat down, instead of saying, I can't believe, instead of like reacting negatively to it, she pretty much, she kind of like, she was empathetic. Empathetic or sympathetic? I believe it's empathetic to why he reacted that way, rather than looking at him as a monster. Because I think if she looked at him as a monster, then that would have pretty much took Anakin over the edge, honestly. So you could argue that she definitely was the thing or the piece or just she was the thing that put Anakin in the right mind frame. But in terms of her impact, and what she did for the galaxy, you don't really see much of that. I think this one was just mainly, she was just mainly noticed or mainly kind of like covered for her relationship with Anakin and how that was building in
Yeah.
comparison to her influence in the first one. In her introduction, the first one was like, okay, we're trying to, she kind of had like a bit, she kind of had a bit more input, and she was kind of sharing, what should be done and what shouldn't be done, because obviously she was pretending to be someone else. So there was always that mystery around her. But I think she had more influence when it came to like, when it came to the protecting the galaxy aspect in comparison to this one. This one just mainly relationship focused. What?
Yeah, I think Padme is really a victim of the poor writing in this, because none of the politics really makes all that much sense. And I guess we'll come to that in a minute, but everything she tries to do and her entire position, I think, is nonsensical and is doomed to fail. But that's not really a function of the character. That's more about the plot requiring her to fail, as opposed to. Yeah.
Was it this film relationship focused rather than politics? Because of course the previous films has been concentrating on politics and, you know what I'm saying, with trading and all of that. But this one seemed like their goal was just more so, okay, relationship context. Yeah, just we're gonna kind of like center around relationships. For example, Obi and Anakin's relationship, which I find very interesting, because you could see like the disparity between Obi and his master and Anakin and Obi. Like you could definitely see that how obviously Obi with his master.
You can see how Obi-Wan really takes after Qui-Gon, right? That he kind of he is a model Jedi, but he's more concerned with the spirit of the rules as opposed to the actual rules. Right? So he will break the rules and he will go his own way, but he will do it because he believes in what the Jedi stand for. Whereas Anakin, I think, there's a stark contrast there, right? He's a lot more independent, a lot more headstrong. He's very impatient. He's very frustrated because he's constantly pushing against these boundaries.
There was even a scene where he even foreshadowed his own death. When he said, "Why do I feel like you're going to be the death of me?" I was like, "Oh crap!"
Yeah,
it's funny that you say that, because he is actually going to be the death of you. Which is a bit crazy, because obviously both of them saw their masters as father figures. I'm pretty sure Obi saw, was it Qui-Gon, as a father figure, and obviously there's a scene where Anakin said he found Obi to be his father figure as well. So yeah, it was just interesting to kind of like see the disparity, even though there was a lot of similarities. But yeah, in terms of this film and like the goal of this film, I felt that it was more, they'll concentrate more on relations rather than the politics. Am I right? Was that the intention?
I think there's two parts to it. There's the personal relationships, right, that shape Anakin into who he will later become, right? All the foundation is laid now for his journey into who we know he will become. But I think there's also a lot of politics and plot going on, right? You've got separatists are forming. There's talk of tens of thousands of systems that are rallying to their cause, and we get this feeling that war is imminent. We get the Jedi kind of realizing that something is up and trying to contain the damage and failing for the most part. We've got the creation of the clone army, and then we've got the outbreak of the actual war, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on, and the status quo changes a lot in this movie. So I'd say it's more or less even about the personal side and the big picture plot. Right. But just sticking with the personal side for a minute, what did you think of the romance subplot between Anakin and Padme? Because that takes up a lot of time, right? So all that time on Naboo, and there are several scenes where they are slowly falling in love.
Like I said, I just felt very it felt very disturbing. I don't know, it just felt weird.
In what way?
Because it's, she knew him since a kid, so it's like very hard to say I could see beauty in it, and worldly written, and like there was even a scene when she could tell that Anakin was flirting with her, and then she said, "It makes me feel uncomfortable." That speaks volumes. Exactly. So it's like okay, you continue to allow him to flirt with you, and end up falling in love, and then end up getting married. It's like, I just found it hard to.
So this entire sequence is infamous for being one of the worst written romances ever, because like George Lucas already struggles with writing people, and he certainly struggles with writing romance, right? So this entire sequence of them trying to come across as human, and it's just the most stilted dialogue, like the way, like this line about how he hates sand. That one, like that one is really infamous. Because
What was that again?
so something like she talks about the beaches of Naboo, and he says he hates sand. It's coarse and it gets everywhere.
Okay.
And that's because he grew up in the desert, and to him, sand means desert, which means harshness, which means danger, right? And on one level, I can kind of see where they're going with this, right? I like this whole idea of these star-crossed couple where they come from different worlds and they can't be together, but they have to be. That's an archetype that has worked many times, right? And then the fact that everything about Naboo is luxurious and it's just a nice world. It's like a paradise. Whereas he comes from a world that is a desert and harsh and just associated with death more than anything. Right? So there's stuff going on here. It just doesn't, like, it doesn't come across like it's something we have to do for the plot, not because it's actually something we want to watch.
Well, I'm surprised. Why? I'm surprised that this is one of the most. Well, is your opinion about this film being like one of the? I don't know if you said it's the worst film out of the franchise, but
I think it is the second worst.
Okay, so is that like a universal opinion or just your opinion?
I don't know. Like, I haven't seen a poll or anything like that.
When I say universal, would you say most people?
I would say a lot of people would agree.
Okay, so I'm a bit confused because I'm finding it hard to see the difference between each of the Star Wars films that I've seen. Now, maybe it's because I'm not paying like attention to detail. Maybe I might be guilty of that, but like I don't really see a difference in the films I've seen. Of course, I think with this one, there's a big difference in comparison to the other films because this one, in terms of like the way that scenes were falling into each other, just didn't feel right. It felt, like I said, it felt very jumpy. So I would maybe agree that this might not have been the greatest out of the franchise, but like I said, for me, the second half of the film was memorable for me out of all the films, and I think that's mainly because of the whole, the emotionally gripping scene with the mother, and then you got the whole lightsaber scene, which probably is one of the biggest fight scenes I've seen out of the Star Wars franchise so far. So maybe I'm guilty of that, but I don't really see much of a difference in terms of story.
So should I go down the list?
You have to, because
all right.
So I want to see what you guys are seeing.
Yeah, so I'm just speaking for myself, right? Like on some things I can kind of report what the general consensus has been, right? But ultimately this is my opinion. So one of the problems with the movie is that the movie doesn't know what the Jedi are. So they are constantly being described as the guardians of peace and stability, right? But the movie can't make up its mind whether they are a police force or soldiers or monks or what, right? So this is like in the first movie, I think it should have already been established, but it's not. But in this movie, it's really showing that there's not a coherent idea about what the Jedi exactly are, what their duties are, what their powers are. So at the start, we see them as bodyguards for a senator, right? Which, okay, I can understand that. But then they do this murder investigation, right? Well, not murder, but going after the assassin, right? And everybody, when they're pursuing the changeling through the streets of Coruscant, which I think is a pretty cool sequence. Like just like Coruscant as a place, and just seeing like the street level view of the Star Wars universe is always something that gets me excited. Everybody, when they reach, when they run into a Jedi, treat them like FBI agents, or like something like that, right? Because like this whole thing about they burst into a nightclub, wielding lightsabers, killing somebody, and then Anakin says, I think it's Anakin, Jedi business, go back to your drinks, and they do. Like, this is something that Jedi are supposed to do, and everybody expects them to. It's a bit like, I don't know, you see somebody running down the streets, and then like a SWAT team descends on them, and you kind of assume that, like, surely this person must have committed a crime, right? This is not an everyday occurrence, but we know what's going on, right? And also Yoda talks about how, I think Yoda has a conversation with Obi-Wan where they realize that the clone army has been hidden from them, right? That in their name, the clone army has been created. But clearly it wasn't them. And they talk about whether or not they should inform the Senate, right? Which suggests that there is a procedure for this, that they owe accountability to the Senate. And then at the very end, they are just generals and lead armies. So like in every scene the Jedi are something different, and I don't know. Like the more I watch these movies and the more I think about it, the less sense it makes, because there's not a coherent picture about what the Jedi are, what their responsibilities and powers are, and how they fit into society. Like I can kind of understand if they kind of wear this monastic order and they kind of do favors for the Senate and for the Chancellor, like they did at the start of Episode 1, for instance, or like being bodyguards to a senator who is in danger. Individual pieces make sense, but if you put them together, it's not really clear what the Jedi are for. They are inspired by samurai from Japanese movies, right? Where samurai will wander the lands and they will go after bandits and other evildoers and they will enforce the law and stuff like that. And that comes from a feudal context, right? Where the samurai are like an aristocracy and they are responsible for upholding law and order and stuff like that in that cultural context. But the Jedi are not an aristocracy. Like they are not knights, even though they're called knights, but they have nothing to do with historical knights. So in what sense are they knights? Is it just because they have a sword and fight people? Because that's what it seems to be, right? And I think that is something that holds back Star Wars in general, is that there isn't like a clear picture of what exactly the Jedi are as an institution. They're kind of generally the good guys, but it's not really defined. So did you have a sense that you knew who the Jedi were in this?
I've always just thought that the Jedi were protectors of the galaxy. They were just used in whatever way that relates to protecting the galaxy. So yeah. I do see where you're coming from, but they're still protecting the galaxy at the end of the day. It's like, So,
but it's like, it feels like nobody actually sat down and thought about, okay, who are the Jedi? It all seems kind of reverse engineered from lines in the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And I think in the first, like in Episode 1, it wasn't that big a deal because the plot still worked. But here, the Jedi are at the center of it. And this whole thing about how the system is failing and about how there are these big events of war and intrigue and politics. At some point, you have to actually decide how the Jedi fit into that and what it is they should be doing. Like if you want to show them failing as an institution, you have to first define what they should be doing. And I think that's kind of missing. And I think in this movie, the seams really start to show. And I don't think this is unsalvageable. I think one of the big problems is that because the movie doesn't know who the Jedi are supposed to be, it doesn't go through the steps of justifying why they end up leading armies. Right? So there are other Star Wars stories like that. Like there's like a spin-off show that's set during the Clone Wars, right? And that goes into more detail about why exactly the Jedi are leading the clones and stuff like that. And it has to do with the Republic has not had an army traditionally, and so there are no officers that could lead the troops. And the Jedi are the best positioned. And by making them fight, they're being kept busy and are distracted from the conspiracy that's trying to take over the galaxy. Right? So that's the kind of idea, but that's not in the movie. And it's not explained and it's not built up. I think that should have been like a focus of what's going on.
Okay.
Right. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect is that the politics is not clearly defined. Like we don't really know what the grievance is, and we don't really see the scale of the conflict. Like there's talk about how there's thousands and thousands of star systems that are joining the separatist cause, but we don't know why. We never see any of them. We don't see. There's not a single character that actually explains why they want to secede. There's Count Dooku, and we'll get to him in a minute. But in terms of like just average people, they don't exist in this story, right? And there should have been somebody who was on the Republic side and maybe worked with the Jedi, and now that their planet is seceding, there's now suddenly the enemy of their former friends, like something like that, right? But none of that exists at all. And I think it all rings hollow and it's really confusing because you don't know who the enemy is and why. That's my take. What's yours?
No, I agree. It kind of felt like they just introduced us to a council or a group of people with like a group. What do you refer them as? Senators as well, or just the people?
They're called the separatists.
Separatists, cool.
Yeah.
So it just felt like they introduced us to a group of separatists that had grievances with the current government at hand, and they just wanted to take over. So I do agree. There wasn't really a reason as to why they were doing what they were doing. There was a scene between Obi and Dooku where he said the master, obviously they were all following the master, so they did kind of fill us in as to why it was happening. Was they were pretty much following the Sith. There's a dark Sith and saying how he's powerful. So I'm guessing the reason why they were kind of like doing what they were doing because they knew that this master guy who was so powerful was soon to take over. So they were pretty much saying this just join the winning side. He tried to mask it as I don't know if he tried to make it seem like he was just joining the master for now so you can end up defeating him. I don't know if he was being genuine about that. It seemed like he was lying. But yeah, in reality, I think with that scene, it told me, okay, cool. They're just joining the winning side because it's just a big threat and they don't want to be on the losing side. That's what I got from that. But yeah, they didn't. But besides that, if that is the case, that they just wanted to join the winning side, then
I don't think that's clear at all because they don't actually say why they want to secede. They don't like the Republic and they think it's corrupt and so on. There isn't like a declaration of secession. There isn't any kind of argument for why the Republic is broken and has to be left. It's just a general sense of bureaucracy and politics, and politicians are always lying and stuff like that. But that's all kind of just platitudes, and there's no specifics. And I was going to get to Dooku next. I think. What did you think about Dooku? Did you think he was an effective character? And
he was he was definitely a liar.
Why is that?
Liar. He was a funny liar because he was. Remember this, like I said, him in the scene where he was like, "Obi, I didn't even know they caught you, or I'll try you out of it." And there was
when he's been captured on Geonosis and he pretends to be shocked that they would do such a thing.
Exactly. Even him with his interaction with Samuel Jackson. What was his character's name?
Mace Windu.
Windu, yeah. He just gave me snakish vibe, a very strong snake, to be fair. Which he did provide an anticlimactic moment when it comes to Anakin because I was expecting Anakin to be stronger. But Obi did better than Anakin. Even though, there was much to learn for Anakin. I get he wasn't at that level of, being that Jedi that everyone were hoping him to be, which was the chosen one. I do get that, but still, I was expecting him to do better. It felt like I was watching like a child against. Yeah, he just felt like it was just watching like a child against an adult when he was against Dooku. But in terms of Dooku's character, he was all right. I did like his like calmness behind his evilness, which gave a more. Sorry.
So here's why I think he's a terrible character.
Oh my god.
Right. Okay, so I like him on paper, right? So first of all, great actor, great performance. He has a lot of gravitas. He's clearly has a lot of experience, right? And I like the idea of a Jedi who thinks the Republic is the bad guys and therefore has to be fought, right? That has the potential to be interesting, but it stays at potential because we don't. First of all, he's not introduced. He does not get an introduction, right? Actually, he gets one, but it's a deleted scene. Like you can look at the deleted scenes for this movie, and the scene where they introduce him, actually communicate what he is about. That's a deleted scene. What's left in the movie is essentially that I think it's Mace Windu or somebody else, somebody on the council says Count Dooku is an extremist, something like that. Like he's not to be taken seriously. He's a nuisance. But he's not somebody we should be paying much attention to, which obviously turns out to be wrong. But so my problem here is that in order for a character like this to really have an impact, they have to be established and they have to be explored. Like we have to see why they do things and their thought process and so on. So he should have been like a recurring villain that kind of opposes Obi-Wan maybe throughout the movie, and maybe there are mirror images around of each other, and we kind of explore this whole idea of how somebody can come to the conclusion that the Republic is beyond redemption and things like that, right? But it's not really there. He's just a bad Jedi, and the performance does not save it. Like it's good, but it doesn't save it, in my opinion. And so when he fights somebody, when he fights Yoda, I felt nothing. Like compare that with the fight between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in A New Hope, right? Where the two face each other on the Death Star. And it feels like the conclusion to a character arc we haven't seen, but it still works. because the scene is written in such a way that we understand what's important, and what's important is that they used to be on the same side, but then one betrayed the other, and they've had this long running conflict, and both think the other side is a fool for picking the side that they're on and stuff like that, right? There's stuff going on, even though we don't get any background, right? We never see them before this, right? And it has emotional weight, so that when Obi-Wan dies, we feel for him, even though this entire thing has lasted maybe 5 minutes. And this is like the case of Count Dooku is the exact opposite, where we spent a whole bunch of time with him, like he appears in various scenes, but we have no idea what he's about, and we don't know why we should care about him.
Didn't the senator mention him when she said she thinks that he was the one that killed her, or am I wrong?
There is a mention. I don't remember if Padme talks about him. The Jedi talk about him at one point.
And then Samuel Jackson said it could never be. It can't be him. I don't know if he's
yeah. Or they say something like he's an extremist. He has extreme opinions, but he's not a murderer or something. Yeah,
yeah. What was the?
He's not a criminal or something.
So they were referring to him.
I think so. If we're talking about the same scene, yeah. Okay. But my thing is just it's kind of like there's this recurring thread in all of this, that there's stuff going on, and individual pieces can be great, but it's not a coherent story. You don't understand just watching it why this is happening and what the stakes are and what the ramifications are, because it's just not communicated. Like on no level, like not the politics, not on a character level. Like Dooku, for instance, we don't know why he does what he does and so on, right? So, and I think that is why all the spectacle falls short, and like at least for me, because there's no weight behind it, and there's no if I don't understand why things are happening, then I have a hard time getting emotionally invested. There are like many different ways in which this happens in this movie, and it all comes together, and it's just kind of a mess.
I hear what you're saying. I think there was a scene where Yoda says, "I've always sensed the darkness in you." I don't know if you remember that.
Does he say it to Dooku?
Yeah, I believe so. So
which means nothing if we've never seen it.
True.
Right?
True. But it doesn't that hold any weight, because obviously we've seen Yoda, and obviously in the previous movies, but he's always mentioning the potential and obviously the prospect of someone becoming someone because of that dark force in them, that darkness in them. So couldn't that have did anything for you? Because obviously it's I get it that Dooku was just introduced, and there wasn't really anything to kind of latch onto when it comes to his character. But the fact that Yoda mentioned that line is okay, so he was kind of was he like an outcast in a way? Could you say?
We don't know, right? We know he's a Jedi, and we know he fell to the dark side, and we know that he has political opinions that essentially are incompatible with the Jedi Order, right? Which is Republic is the bad guys and is corrupt and has to be replaced.
And you did mention that he used to be a Jedi. So with what Yoda said, and the fact that he said he used to be a Jedi, that you could kind of put two and two that okay, so it seems that he received that Yoda treatment where Yoda rejected that person because obviously of him being obviously the darkness that you already sensed in him. So could you say that could have told us okay, there was already built up frustration already there, especially between him and Yoda when it came to the showdown. So then that could have been the reason which led him into. I do agree, by the way. He was. I do now. I agree because he was introduced to us, and there wasn't really any backstory or.
And we don't need his full backstory, right? But like a competent script will tell you what a character's deal is and what they're about, right? And that is just missing. Like we are told about stuff about him, right? Like that, like what reputation he has and stuff like that. Yeah, but I'm just saying it's a weak point. And if it was the only one, then it wouldn't be so bad. But it's one out of many. And they all kind of come down to the same thing, which is it doesn't clearly explain what's going on. It doesn't establish any of the stuff that needs to be established. And at this point we're two movies into a trilogy, right? Like there's not much time to establish anything else, right? Because we've only got one movie left.
Yeah. Okay, I get what you're saying.
And I think really. My opinion of the Phantom Menace has gone up over time because I used to not like it at all, but over time I've liked it more. I think it still has very fatal flaws, like we talked about last time. But this is, I think, the one that breaks the trilogy because this is where all the heavy lifting is supposed to happen, and it doesn't. And so, as a result, everything that comes after Like we can talk about that next time if you see it the same way. But I think like this is where all the foundation, like the foundation should probably have been set in the first movie, and they didn't really. And now we're in the second movie, and it again drops the ball. And now we're in the third movie of a trilogy, and we still don't really know what the conflict is. Not really. Like we've been told some things, but it's incomplete and flimsy and superficial, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. It seems like you're not even you, but it seems like the direction that they've headed into is concentrating more on the, I wouldn't call it a soap opera, but like, you know, the whole you know, like the relationships, and obviously you've got the lightsabers. So it seems like they've kind of, I wouldn't say fallen into that trap, but they've intentionally gone to that route because obviously, you know, Star Wars has become such a big thing, and like you said, a lot of Star Wars viewers just like Star Wars because obviously the lightsabers. So it's maybe they've gone, maybe, you know, they're guilty of that now, whereas they're just, you know, concentrating on the lightsabers and less on the story itself. And obviously, you know, I've got issue with that. I felt the same with Bad Boys, and I felt the same with Fast and Furious, where they just kind of like less focus on the story itself, more on the aesthetics and the theatrics. So I have personally, for me, I haven't fully, like, after this conversation, I can definitely say now that I've noticed that, okay, cool, I do see, you know, the inconsistencies when it comes to the storytelling in comparison to the previous films. But have
I ruined another movie for you?
No, that's what I was gonna say. It hasn't fully ruined my experience yet, because I was having, like, overall, I think this franchise for me so far, it still isn't in my top 10 sci-fis of all time. But I am slowly starting to like it. And I think I'm slowly starting to like it, which is a bit weird because you would have thought, like you mentioned, like one of the first film was one of the best films of all time in sci-fi history. But for me, it wasn't. But now the film that I'm liking, in terms of like the second half, for you, this film is one of the worst. So it's like, okay, cool. So I'm slowly starting to like the franchise, but it's, you know, which if, you know, I'm slowly starting to like the franchise, but I'm liking the franchise based on reasons which you don't like. So it's like, you get what I'm saying? So that's why I don't think you've ruined my mood yet. You've ruined my experience yet. But I don't know. I don't think, so far, I don't think this is going to be one of the best franchises I've ever seen in sci-fi history, but it's definitely a franchise that I'm starting to like. So, but I do see the inconsistencies that you're talking about, and I'm intrigued to see how it does end, and then I'll look at the totality of it and say, okay, cool. But so far, I am liking it. I did mention the stuff which I didn't like was the whole point where it felt a bit, you know, messy with the whole scene, jumping into scenes, and obviously the points that you've mentioned as well. I do see the inconsistencies as well. So maybe I just need a day to let it marinate. But how I'm feeling right now, you know, I think the second half of the movie kind of made it like it for me. I'm giving this film a 6.5 out of 10. So you know, so I don't know. I'm my experience for this film isn't as terrible as it is for you, but so far,
it's more about, like, there are pieces in it that I quite enjoy. It's more that, like, compare this with Empire Strikes Back, right? At this point, we were well into the story. Luke was on his journey. We knew exactly what the conflict was about. We didn't even see that much of the Empire, and we didn't see that much of the rebellion, right? We don't actually see them fighting against the Empire for that much. Outside of the attack on the Death Star. We knew what was going on, we knew what the stakes were, and because of that, we could focus on the character's journey, specifically Luke's, but also the others. And I think this movie, I think because it hasn't done that, it drags down everything around it, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I understand what you're saying. I'll definitely say as well, the previous movies, it was more emotionally tugging than this one. Besides the whole Luke losing his mum scene. But yeah, it seemed like like you said, it did seem a bit messy, because I think they were trying to fit in so many pieces, and they were trying to turn it into a big theatrical spectacle as well, which, you know, it at the expense of the story itself. So
and it's a bit like last time we talked about how to fix the Trade Federation and the occupation of Naboo, and you can do it in one line. Right? You say Naboo is important for trade into the galactic core, and if you control that, you control one of the most important trade routes in the galaxy. And that by itself makes it self-evident why Naboo is important. So you fix that with one line. Here, I think it's similar, where you have to fix a bunch of things, and each one might take a line or two, but it's not terribly complicated. Like, you could replace the whole politics stuff with like more efficient lines about what exactly it is that the separatists want, and why the Republic is unable or unwilling to make that concession, and maybe have like a planet that is torn right down the middle, where some of them are loyalists and some of them are separatists, and they both sides have their reasons, and that's like a microcosm of what happens in the bigger galaxy. And maybe we should have seen one of those separatist planets at some point, and not just be told about how many of them there are. Like all of these things are relatively simple. The movie just needs to do them.
Yeah, I hear where you come from. Yeah,
okay. Any final verdict?
Just bring on the next one. What's the next one, by the way?
Next one is Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
Okay.
So third and final chapter in this trilogy. It's called Revenge of the Sith. What are your expectations?
The title is a bit interesting because I don't know what revenge the Master would have, because I think he's currently in the winning position, ain't he? So unless something bad happens to him, yeah, I don't see. So I'm guessing something bad happens to the Master, and then he wants revenge. I don't know. That's what I'm guessing. But so far he's in the winning position, so I don't see why there's revenge, unless it links back to his past. And obviously, yeah, maybe they're going to show us a bit of the Master's past actually. So they might explain to us why the Master is the Master, why he's so against the Jedi, and why he wants to take over the galaxy and stuff. I don't know, but yeah, that's what I'm guessing.
Okay, we'll know next week.
Cool. Well, guys, hopefully you enjoyed today's discussion. Let us know what you think down below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and share with people that you know. You know what I'm saying? Join them to the party. Join them to the community. And yeah, guys, we will catch you next week. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.